In episode 227 of Deep Questions with Cal Newport, the author and computer scientist argues that in this current paradigm, many knowledge workers are able to craft their own deep life that involves also choosing the living location that doesn't necessarily have to be tied to your existing living location or where your family is stabilized, because of the flexibility of work and life and how they mix together somewhat in this current paradigm of knowledge work especially. And as part of crafting a deep life, as Newport argues, you can score specific locations based on criteria that you have to define where it is best for you to actually live, at least in the short term, when your criteria align with that living location. And Newport also argues that whenever you score a location to decide whether living there is the right decision for you, you want to apply a sum function to the criteria that you have, as opposed to a max function to one or a few criteria. Because the concept of a deep life is a life that is well balanced on all aspects and on some key aspects that are key criteria when it comes to defining your living location for the future and for now, that I'm gonna show you in this video. Because in this video, we are looking at how we can actually implement those concepts in a Notion template and in a Coda doc, so that you can actually systematize your decision-making process for deciding where to live based on specific criteria. And these templates are very customizable. So we will start from looking at the Notion template and how it is composed and how to use it. And then we will shift towards the same concepts applied to a Coda doc, and the structure will be the same. The layout will be slightly different due to the difference in tools, and that's the plan for this video. So let's get into it, and starting with the Notion template. So this Notion template is very minimal. It has all the key components as proposed by Cal Newport in that episode and in his philosophy of a deep life in general. And you can see here that there are 4 key databases that are at the very foundation of this system, and these are decision criteria. These are criteria that are the default that Cal Newport proposes in his episode number 227 of his podcast. But you can also customize to add or remove or edit existing criteria from that list. Then we have the criteria fit database. That's a join table essentially, where you can score each criteria for each location. So these databases are related. So criteria fit is related to decision criteria, and criteria fit is also related to locations, because for each location you want to have the ability to score each criteria and then tally up that score as a sum on the main location view. And finally, we also have continents. That's mostly an areas database where you can categorize possible locations that you are considering and that you want to score in this system. So down here there are 2 operational buttons, and then there is also a view of some example locations that I've plugged in to this template already, and that are sorted in this view by score. That is, the highest score will be at the top and the lowest score will be at the very bottom. And the score is a sum of all the criteria that you score from 1 to 5. So practically speaking, here are 2 key buttons that you can use. If you want to define your criteria, you can click this button here. It will prompt you to select your key decision criteria, and you will see here are the ones that we already have: community and family, non-professional opportunities, professional opportunities, people, environment, and cost of living. These are the ones as proposed by Cal Newport, but you can freely add new criteria from here, or you can remove criteria by selecting them and removing them, or you can also edit the names of these criteria. And you can see each criteria is also a page that you can open, and you can describe it further if you like. The next prompt in this operational button is: what's your preferred continent, if any? So if you have any preference in terms of continents where your locations are going to be based, that's where you can define them to this checkbox. And this allows you to then narrow down your choices later on when you need to actually define what locations you want to consider in the first place for your decision-making process. So here we already have some scored continents here. And then there is another button, and this uses two new features in Notion that are buttons. That's a button that you can click, and AI blocks, that is Notion AI, so that you can brainstorm locations already in the continents that you like, depending on your preference. If you don't have anything in mind, that might be a good starting point, although the locations in the world are almost infinite, so it might be overwhelming to actually use AI to generate ideas if you don't know where to start either. But if you already have ideas of locations instead, then you can already plug them in here and score them directly. Otherwise, that's how the AI block works. So you can click on this button and you will see here there is an instruction block that tells you what to do. You can see here there is a prompt for Notion AI, and here you can scope down the brainstorming process to a specific country, and that's where you can define here what's the country that you want to look at. For example, let's say Germany, and then you can click on generate. That's a custom AI block, and here are some ideas including pros and cons and resources that sometimes are broken, and that's due to the fallacies of AI models right now. So sometimes you might click on these links and notice that they don't lead anywhere, and that we can't really fix that because that's a systemic issue then. And if you want to consider any of these cities in your decision-making process for scoring each criteria, then you can select the block for that city, and you can already do a drag and drop down here in this database. And you will then choose the continent by yourself. And whenever you open the page, you will also find the template that you can apply right there. And that's the core function of this whole system, to score these locations. So whenever you have a location, you can open that location. That's a page. Here you can see the continent and the total score. Down here, you can click this button to add all the criteria scoring that you can score in this table. You can see the name of the criteria, what's the related decision criteria in the master list that you defined in the first step, in the first button that I showed you before, and what's the score for each criteria. So in here, let's say like this. And once you have these scores, you will then see the score sum at the very top. And if we go back to the main homepage, you will see those locations at the very bottom of the page where they are scored down here. And once you've done your brainstorming, you can also delete these blocks here generated by the buttons if you like. Whenever you want to see all the content that you've ever added to this system and all the scoring and all the locations, then you can go and open the master databases, the key access points to that information. For example, you want to look at all the locations, I can go to locations. I will see the table of locations, and you can open each location. You can search for locations to see the score sum and the specific criteria and any notes that you might have inside that page. And that is really it for this system that is meant to be as frictionless as possible for you to generate idea, to define your criteria, and to actually score locations based on those criteria, and actually apply a sum function that takes into account all the criteria with the same weight, as opposed to a max function, as Cal Newport argues, because applying a max function on a specific criteria or few criteria can be dangerous, because then you optimize your life for that at the expense of all the other key criteria for living a deep life. And that was the Notion template. Now let's see the same exact principles applied in a Coda doc. Here is the Coda doc, and you can see at the very top we have the criteria definition exactly like it was in Notion. In Notion it was through a button. Here you can see them directly on the page, just for a style purpose. And then you have the continents that you prefer down here. And finally, right here below, you have the same exact table that we just saw in Notion, where each location is a page, and each location is scored based on the criteria fit that you scored yourself. And whenever you want to add a new location, you can click this button right here to quickly add a new location. Here you will have the name of the location. You can choose the continent. The score sum is automatic, so you won't have that directly. And after a few seconds, you will see the criteria populated directly on the page, so that you can score them for this location using this quick scoring method here. And the score sum will then be tallied up here. And these criteria are automatically filled out whenever you create a new location because of an automation that we have that is running in the background in this Coda doc. And you can see that automation from the settings menu. You can go to automations. You see we have one rule that is on, and that is when there is a row changed in the locations table, any editable column. Then we have an if condition, that is if is blank, meaning the step 1 result, so the location row doesn't have any criteria scoring related to it, because we have two different tables. One is locations, one is criteria scoring, and there is a direct relation between those tables. So we look at that column in the locations table, and if it is empty, that means we need to add those criteria for that location. And that is how we then run this action, that is push the buttons in the decision criteria table, add scoring criteria. And I'm going to show you that button right now, because you can see in the database page that we have the core databases exactly like in Notion gathered on this page directly. And in the decision criteria table, you will see that we have a column that is hidden, and that is add scoring criteria. And this is a button column. And you can see that it adds a row to the criteria fit table where the criteria name corresponds to the criteria name where the button is pushed, and the decision criteria, that's a relation property, is filled out with this row, that is the row in the decision criteria table, because we want to reference that decision criteria in the criteria fit join table. And then we have all these other rules that are actually mostly empty, because this button is not really pushed manually, but it's only here to run the automation properly, so that whenever you create a new location, we can add the criteria fit for scoring automatically within your doc. And if we take a look at all the other tables in this doc, you can see we have continents, exactly like in Notion. That's a table with all the continents, and you can score them in a checkbox preferred. We have locations, that's where all your locations that you score over time are stored. And you can also sort them by score if you like. And you can see each location is a page as per usual. And you have the criteria fit table. That's the join table that works in the background to make sure that you can score each criteria for your locations, and you can see them, all the locations and all the criteria for those locations right here. So that's the new location that we just added that you can see in here, and you can see all the criterias and your score for those criterias, as well as the median score. And really, that is it. That is how the Notion template works. That is how the Coda doc works. On the Coda doc, be aware that if you want to spice it up with some AI brainstorming or idea generation, you can install the OpenAI pack, connect your account if you have a token, and you can then use that to generate ideas, to add buttons, but that is outside of the scope of this template, because not everyone has an OpenAI API access. So this is not included natively in this Coda doc. But if you are interested in that, you can go to Insert, then you have Packs, and you can search for the OpenAI pack, and you will need to connect it, and then you will find all the different buttons and formulas that you can use in here on the Coda doc. And that is that really. That is the decision-making template based on Cal Newport's episode number 227 of the Deep Questions with Cal Newport podcast, and the overall philosophy of a deep life. You can find all the links in the description of this video. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them down below. For now, thanks for watching, and see you soon.